Welcome. I'm here with Amanda Goldston, the senior consultant at CohnReznick within the technology team. Amanda, thank you for being with us. How are you?
How are you today? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing great. It's such a pleasure to have you on. Let's go ahead and break into some of the topics for today. What are challenges that the cannabis industry is facing, and how does data play a role in these challenges too? What can we learn from other industries and how they use data?
So, we all know that cannabis is a burgeoning industry, and many operators have essentially just had to hit the ground running in order to produce enough products and stock their shelves in some capacity. Now that the industry is starting to mature, we're seeing the need for some more thoughtful decision making, and data can play a significant role in this since data is really the basis for the answers for these strategic questions and decisions that they ultimately have. For example, data can help with those production and operations decisions to understand not only what to make and when to make it, but also who to sell it to at the end of the day. So it can help connect that with target consumer preferences and demand, and also with production capacity within each facility. It can also help gain an accurate understanding of the margins that are associated with each strain and within each product line to get a better idea of, at the end of the day, which products or which lines or which strains are creating the most value for each organization by understanding things like the types of raw material inputs that are needed and what that supplier network looks like, to understand from a labor perspective what type of resources are required from a cultivation and production standpoint to produce one particular product or one particular strain. And also from an overhead perspective to understand how that can impact what you should be pricing your product at the shelf level. So data can also help mitigate those risks that are inherent with doing business today. So think about those supply chain challenges that we all know are prevalent. Having access to data can not only give you visibility into the supply chain from start to finish, but it can also give you an idea, as I was alluding to before, about the costs of the raw materials, for example, that you're going to need as inputs into your production run, and an idea of where those raw materials are coming from, and an idea of how to plan in the future if you anticipate some sort of an out of stock around that. And then finally, data can also help organizations create trusted brands in the market. So if we take a page out of the playbook from other industries like the CPG industry, understanding the end consumer is really only made possible by analyzing data, and whether that's your internal sales data and whether that's also including external third-party market data as well. It can really help illuminate what's important to customers and to your target customer segments to understand what strains or what new product lines are worth pursuing in the future. And then in terms of incorporating that third-party market insight data, it can really help by matching up what your target consumer segments are and what they want in cannabis products, and ultimately what will support increased sales. So ultimately, the goal is that organizations should be able to develop value propositions that align with the goals, desires, and psychographic characteristics of their target consumer segments to help drive sort of those strategic decisions and growth goals.
Fantastic. And why and how should ESG be a focus of data-driven decision making? Can data be used to drive operational efficiencies and environmental consciousness, for example?
Yes. So ESG is an important buzzword in the market today, but it's ultimately more than just a catchphrase. Consumer preferences are tied to ESG and sustainability focused initiatives. More and more, we're seeing that consumers care not only where the products that they're purchasing are coming from, but the manner in which they're produced and how they're made, and also whether or not the overarching organization has some sort of a focus or initiative on environmental, social, or sustainability goals. So ultimately, having a focus on ESG can be just the thing that tips the scale from one brand to another in the marketplace and can really create those market differentiating opportunities. So especially as we think about MSOs going into new markets and creating those more national brands, it's going to be more important than ever for cannabis operators to be able to create those market differentiating opportunities, to be able to craft branding around those market differentiating factors, and then to ultimately be able to translate that back to their overarching value proposition to make room for themselves and their brands, not only on the shelves of retail stores, but also in the minds of consumers. And then in terms of operational efficiencies and ESG, those two do not have to be and should not be mutually exclusive. So there is a negative impact to running business inefficiently from both a bottom line cost perspective and also from an environmental degradation perspective. Data can and should be used to analyze that waste and to understand how to drive efficiencies from both that cost perspective and from that environmental perspective within an organization's operations.
Tell me a little bit more about the connected nature of this and why that's so important.
Sure. So really understanding what systems or tools or processes need to be in place to support the collection and aggregation of data is a huge piece of this puzzle as well. You need ultimately that connected environment in order to get to the data that you need to answer the strategic questions that you have in order to make those thoughtful business decisions.
Understood. Okay, and as investors continue to look for opportunities within cannabis, what should they be looking for? How can they know that an organization is on the right path to succeed in the market as it stands right now?
So key questions to ask are there metrics or KPIs in place? And do those metrics or KPIs extend beyond traditional financial metrics? Do they go into operations and production? And if so, at what level do they go into operations and production? Are they at the strain level, so a super granular level of data, or are they really a level above and more at the production line level? So maybe they're missing some opportunities and insights within the data that they already have and are utilizing. Another question is, do they have clear visibility into the supply chain? Do they understand their raw material inputs, where they're coming from, what potential challenges might be given the market environment today with that? And do they understand the cost of those? Do they understand the cost and the hours required from a labor resource perspective and how that impacts each product line and whether a product is, say, hand trimmed or whether it's machine trimmed at the end of the day? And then, of course, that overhead question that I was talking about before. Do they have insights and eyes on how overhead is impacting what they should be pricing their products at the retail level? Another question to ask is, how often are there out of stocks on the shelves? And if this occurs with any frequency, why does this occur? So a key thing to understand here is, are these out of stocks occurring because production is focused on producing the wrong products? Or is the organization really lacking insight into what their consumers actually are interested in and are producing completely the wrong products because they're missing that level of insight? And then finally, are they just producing flower just to produce flower? Or is there some sort of forward-thinking strategy in place that connects consumer demand to their production capacity that is driving these decisions? At the end of the day, operators or retailers with an understanding of how data can help make those key, thoughtful, strategic business decisions, that's paramount to the equation here. Even if they still need help in working through those strategic questions, and even if they still need help building that connected environment, at least having a baseline understanding of how data can help and where they want to go ultimately is a good sign.
That's great. What an amazing amount of information. Very, very insightful. Amanda Goldston, Senior Consultant at CohnReznick within the technology team. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.